roof stains with Leprechaun Soft Wash. 751-2325.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 5 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. We were talking toward the end of the campaign, the political campaign of last year. We were talking toward the end of the campaign that it was such a memorable campaign. I guess that's the best word I want to use, memorable. Is that I wonder, like, you know how sometimes 10 years after a president was elected, you forget who ran against him. You forget a lot of the things about the campaign. We were saying, I don't think we're going to forget this one. I think we're going to remember this one, and I don't think anybody's going to forget that Donald Trump was challenged by Hillary Clinton. I think that's going to be something that none of us ever forget. But one of the things I'm wondering what will fade is will any of the issues fade, or will the only things that remain in our memory be some of the uncomfortable moments when. And I'm not trying to be political here, but whether it was Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton just saying something that kind of made you cringe, it's like, wow, why are we doing that? Why are these people who were supposed to hold up with the highest level of expectations, why are they saying some of these things? And one way to perhaps never forget is to have kept a journal for the whole year. And if you didn't, then Richard North Patterson did it for you. This guy has so many credentials. It's such an honor to have him on our show. He's a journalist. He's a contributor to Good Morning America, Fox News Sunday, Hardball, the London Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Washington Post. He, I believe he was writing for the Huffington Post, right? With the articles that are in this book. The book is called Fever Swamp, A Journey Through the Strange Neverland of the 2016 Presidential Race. Richard North Patterson, it's an honor. Thank you, sir, for being on the air with us today.
Oh, great to be with you.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I am sitting in a hotel in snowy, cold New York, so you guys are better off.
New York is snowing right now?
It was a couple days ago, and it lingers when it's cold enough.
Oh, man.
Nice.
Yeah, I was up there. I keep wanting to go back, and I want to see the snow again, Robin. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Robin grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up in New York, and we're both missing the snow. I know from your perspective, you'd rather be here, but the grass is always greener. The snow is always whiter, whatever it may be, right?
Well, absolutely so, though I was in Mexico a couple of days ago, and believe me, that was just heaven weather-wise. So.
I bet it was. So you kept a journal, but it was more on the professional end rather than the personal end, not to say that you left out your personal thoughts, but did you know in the beginning that this was going to become a book?
No, I didn't, but pretty quickly I realized that as someone who spent most of his life writing novels, that this was the best story that one could imagine. I mean, as you point out, Larry, the campaign was the single most unpredictable, surprising, sometimes startling campaign we have. And no, I don't think anybody of such an age will ever forget it. But the second thing is that a novelist loves good characters, whether you like them or not. Great characters make a novel, and we had them. Particularly one, the central figure, Donald Trump, who was I think a unique figure. We would all agree in American politics. So writing about this was irresistible. So I wrote every week for the Huffington Post, and pretty soon my publisher said, "This looks like an account of the campaign." So we took the pieces in chronological order. I annotated them for later information, hindsight, all of that, contributed some original essays. And what we have here is an account in real time of the events of the campaign, is thorough and as penetrating as I could make it.
And unlike the normal novelist approach, and we've spoken to so many novelists, so I know this is not always the case, but in many cases, a novelist will have at least a general idea of where the book is going to go at the end. You had no idea. When you were writing this one, you had no clue what was going to happen.
Me and about 250 other million Americans, that's the thing, just scrambling to keep up with this. And one of the fascinating things was watching Trump, how he reacted to various events, how he reacted to pressure. And one of the things I really focused on was his psychology. Because what we learned from Richard Nixon, for example, is the psychology of a president is as important as the issues that he embraces or the positions he takes. In a flawed psychology can lead to scary things, and basically Nixon cracked. And we had a national crisis as a result. And I've got to say, I think that Trump is infinitely more volatile than Richard Nixon ever imagined being.
Do you remember a news item? It was probably more of a New York news item than a national news item, but there was a young man in New York, and he was trying to make a name for himself, I guess, as a reporter. And so he shows up at one of the conferences that Donald Trump is giving in New York. And he calls him the King of New York. And when he looks at the camera, he says, "I'm here. The King of New York is here. I'm going to ask a question." So then they call on him to ask a question. And he says to Donald Trump, he says, "What is your opinion about the topless girls in Times Square?" And Donald Trump says, "I'm not going to answer. That's not a dignified question for this kind of a forum." And then he goes on to the next. And I'm thinking, you're kidding me. You're kidding me.
Trump said that?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy who attacked Miss Universe is Miss Piggy?
Right.
I mean, you're serious?
I thought it was the funniest thing. I thought, what? You can't.
Yeah.
I mean, the kid.
So delicate.
Yeah, the kid just wanted to get, his moment. I asked the guy a question and he answered it, and well, he got it. I mean, I don't know how many hits he got on YouTube, but anyway. So, but it was those kinds of things that caught us off guard and made us cock our head to one side. I don't want to say we laughed because we didn't always laugh. Sometimes we just felt like it was like, well, that was weird, and not just the candidates, by the way. It was also the supporters of the candidates that were making us wonder what's going on.
Well, I mean, we're so alienated from each other, but about Trump, I mean, I have to ask, what kind of a guy pretends to have a relationship with a murderous autocrat, Vladimir Putin, who he's never met? Which he did for a long time. I mean, it's okay for 6-year-olds to have imaginary friends, but 7-year-olds are running for president, not so much, particularly when it's a Russian autocrat. I mean, what kind of a guy talks about harassing women and then says, "Well, I was really only kidding"? Or, and you guys may have missed this one, in the 90s, pretended to be his own PR guy so he could call up People magazine and brag about his romantic and financial successes. I mean, that is an unusual human being. Okay? And we have now succeeded in electing him president. And you make a great point about the supporters too, because I mean, one of the problems we have in this country, and I wrote about it, is how alienated we are from each other. I mean, various Americans live in gated communities of the mind where they only hear the information they want to hear, whether it's real news, fake news, slanted news, whatever it is. I mean, lots of Americans no longer know or trust each other. And as a result, somebody like Trump or anyone can get up and make claims. And if they strike a psychic chord in the listeners, it doesn't matter whether the claims are true or not, or what is discovered about them or not. I mean, there was such a bond between Trump and the people that were most committed to him. He was like a human Powerball ticket. People's sort of last chance.
The character,
and that's how they felt.
Yeah, the character element of Donald Trump was interesting to follow. The candidate element of Donald Trump was hard to nail down. Mm-hmm. And when we would talk to people who had already decided that they were going to support him, and we had reasonably intelligent conversations with them, none of them denied the things you're saying. And the maintaining of support for Donald Trump was all about their belief that he would be a good businessman and a good leader. But they never discounted or denied what you're saying as far as some of the uncomfortable, cringe-worthy things.
Well, and what's so interesting about this, Larry, is the level of desperation people felt about what they perceived was going on in the country, such that they would take a flyer on Donald Trump, even though, as you point out, a lot of them did appreciate that he had, shall we say, some issues as a human being. That's what's sort of interesting now. We don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to be a traditional Republican and just sign Paul Ryan's bill and sort of play, constitutional monarch, Queen Elizabeth, or will he actually stick to some of the stuff he was talking about, like, dumping free trade, in building infrastructure and launching trade wars with the Chinese and protecting entitlements. That's not traditional Republican stuff. It'll be very interesting to see how he gets along with his own party.
And when we had calls from people who didn't like Trump because he was a Republican, I would say he's not really a Republican. I mean, and I'm not trying to make any political statements, but just analyzing what it means, what the philosophy is of that party. It doesn't really seem to match with what he was saying and doing. The other odd thing was the support for Hillary. If we could go to Hillary for a second, there was almost a worshiping going on of Hillary by her supporters, and it was kind of hard to nail down that as well. And then also to Bernie, by the way, we had our share of Bernie supporters who were kind of he can do no wrong, rather than talking about the issues that are being brought to the table and why they are good or bad. We were all over the map as far as intelligent conversation goes.
Well, you make a very important point, which I tried to address in Fever Swamp, because I wrote about Bernie a lot, I wrote about Hillary a lot, as well as writing about Trump. And you're right, it's interesting. It almost became like theology more than politics, where you bought into the absolute rightness of your candidate and the wrongness of everyone else. The Bernie versus Hillary thing was interesting. There was a lot of anger, particularly on behalf of the Bernie folks against Hillary. It became very hard, I think, to bring the party together, although they managed to some degree. And that's what's so toxic about some of the things I wrote about in Fever Swamp, the degree to which Americans just don't listen to each other. They're too mad to hear anymore. And we don't have, as citizens, common experiences. One may or may not like military service, but there's no question that used to bring people from different backgrounds and different parts of the country together. We don't have that anymore.
I think what we have, too, is the Facebook phenomenon and the Twitter phenomenon in this way, because before we had that, a professional propagandist, if there is such a thing, would be the ones who were writing things that were slanted to kind of propagandize whatever it is they wanted to propagandize. We all became amateur propagandists. We all started putting things on Facebook and YouTube, and what do you call it, Twitter. The one I remember real clearly was the guy who he burned a church somewhere here in the South, and he wrote something about Donald Trump, vote for Donald Trump or something like that. Remember? Yeah. And he was actually against Trump. He was trying to show that I guess he wanted people to go against Trump by doing something horrendous. Remember that guy?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. I can't remember his name.
Well, it's amazing how so many people become participants in the national story, regardless of what they do or the validity of what they have to say. It's very hard to distinguish anymore between a reasonable source and not, or know where stuff is coming from. I mean, this whole Pizzagate thing that got its fake news currency about, an alleged child molestation ring being run by Hillary Clinton's campaign aides. Crazy stuff. And yet it caused a guy with a gun to walk in and threaten a lot of people in a pizza parlor. I mean, that's sort of where we've gotten in this country.
And the uniqueness about your book is that you do it more than a writer's perspective. I feel that your past life as a trial attorney and an assistant attorney general is shining through also.
Well, one of the things that was really important in this campaign is the whole Supreme Court controversy over who was going to get to appoint a justice, and also, issues like voter ID laws. The whole notion that got perpetuated, there's massive voter fraud, which Trump claimed was going to be perpetuated by illegal immigrants and minorities. It simply isn't true. But there is absolutely no evidence of any material in-person voting fraud in this country. And yet, millions and millions of people believe that the election is going to be stolen from Donald Trump by hordes of illegal voters. And, when you can no longer have recourse to truth or a commonly accepted notion what the facts really are, then it's all this stuff you're talking about, claims and counterclaims, which are weightless.
Oh, yeah, and also the hacking from the Russians in favor of Trump. That's another story we don't know.
Well,
we haven't heard the end of that one yet. I guess.
Well, I actually refer this latest thing. The report that the Russian intelligence services have material with which to blackmail Trump, both personal and financial. I allude to that in my book because that's been around for some time. I mean, the interesting thing about these latest reports is they're pretty easy to believe, but they're very hard to prove. And I don't know that we'll ever. Yeah. I don't know that we'll ever know. And on the one hand, I think, that sounds like our guy. On the other hand, I think it's irresponsible to be circulating this stuff without the ability to verify it, which so far nobody, at least in the press, seems to have. And I think there's a lot of discomfort with that. And Trump's going to turn it around, of course.
Richard,
he's going to say.
I have a question for you, Richard, about your work as a novelist. I mean, you've written some very, very well received novels. 22, I think it said in my notes.
Yeah.
22.
But who's counting? Yeah.
But who's counting? and so let me. I saw Tom Selleck. Is that the guy with the mustache? Tom
yes.
Selleck. He was on The View with the ladies on The View, and they were asking him a political question, and he kind of avoided it by saying. The audience that watches your show is the audience that made me able to be on your show. Because if I didn't have an audience, I wouldn't be successful, and therefore I wouldn't be here, and you couldn't ask me that question. So if I answer, I'm going to be alienating half of them. And so I'd rather just remain an actor, and I'll keep my voting private. And Johnny Carson used to have that opinion, and Elvis Presley expressed that opinion. But as a novelist, who is also a journalist, by the way, I mean, you're in an interesting position because you don't want to alienate half of your audience that buys your novels. Or do you? What did you?
Well, I certainly don't want to. I may be managing to, in spite of my beliefs. I mean, I have respect for differing views for sure. You can't be a responsible citizen, observer, or journalist, whatever, and not have that. Well, I made the decision a long time ago that I was going to say what I thought about public issues, both in my novels, because I've written about a lot of controversial stuff, and in the journalistic forum, because opinion is an important element in information and helping people to think. And so I decided I want to be part of the public dialogue in these issues and take the chance, that not everyone would love it.
And there was also that speculation during the campaign, because I really found it odd that Bernie Sanders was really gaining momentum. He seemed to have more supporters than Hillary did. All of a sudden, he was called in to see President Obama, and then the night that the delegates were supposed to cast their votes between Bernie and Hillary, Bernie made the speech and he dropped out even before the delegates could cast their votes. Do you think that he would have won over Hillary?
I don't think he could have won the nomination. I mean, she got 4 million more votes in the end, I think part of the problem that Bernie had in a Democratic primary is that, like a lot of white progressives, he had a very fervent support from progressives and young people. He did not have a long history with other groups in the party, particularly people of color, and I think that really hurt him. It wasn't that he wasn't a supporter of civil rights. He had been all his life. It's that the Clintons had a history and a relationship with a lot of party constituencies that Sanders didn't have, and I think that was really the thing more than anything that did him in. He just couldn't grow beyond his very excited base. I mean, he did a wonderful job. but he couldn't quite get there.
Richard North Patterson is our guest. He's a very accomplished author and journalist and a contributor to the big one, so we're really honored that he's on our little show. The book he has written is called Fever Swamp. It's a journey through the strange neverland of the 2016 presidential race. And if you could, we would like to make a suggestion to you based on the book, Fever Swamp, is that you also parlay that into a board game. Just follow.
Now you're giving him a challenge.
Yeah, hold on. Just listen to this. So just like Monopoly has two stacks of cards, like if you roll the dice, draw a blue card. Okay.
Yeah.
So the blue card says your candidate just said your opponent's supporters are deplorable. Move back 2 spaces. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good.
I love this. Or your candidate just accused Ted Cruz's father of being involved in the Kennedy assassination.
Yes. Move back 3 spaces. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I just think that would be a great board game. I don't know.
Well, the problem is it would be X-rated for children.
Too funny. So as you're writing the book, you finally at one point decide this could be a book. So when was the book released?
The last piece of writing was November 11th, and it came out 2 months later, which is a land speed record for publishers. But we really figured it was relevant now because it's not only an account of the campaign, but it's very much sort of a prediction of what kind of President Donald Trump will be, because there is so much discussion of his behavior, character, psychology, his reactions to things. Throughout the book, because I think, Trump is very much a guy who lives in the moment, and his relationship to reality is subjective. It's in terms of his own needs. Ben Carson's a psychopath, quote unquote, one day, and next day, he's a cabinet appointee. It's however Trump wants to feel and be, and that's going to make it fascinating.
Well,
I think.
And that is not untrue. But also, what's interesting is I can remember, and I wish I remember the guy's name, but there was somebody who was absolutely down on Donald Trump one day in the news. He made national news, and the next day he came out and apologized. And I said to Robin, "What happened overnight?" Did they have a meeting? Did he pay him off? What happened overnight? How do you change your mind so strongly about somebody? So I don't.
Well, it beats me, but I think a lot of people are scared now. This is a very powerful guy, I think a lot of people are going to think very hard about crossing him. But he has a thin skin and a long memory.
Well, first, I hope you're wrong. I hope that he, as far as your conclusion, I know you're not wrong about the timeline. But the conclusion, I hope you're wrong, and I hope everybody who feels that way is wrong. However, I reserve the right to think you might be right, and if you are right, I hope we, the people, we are ultimately the boss of the president, and hopefully we, the people, stand up to anything that is unreasonable.
Well, one of the things I tried to do is write about what I perceived going on within Trump and what his potential for harm was, and people can read it and decide. But I hope I was informative and enlightening and entertaining in this book as I wanted to be. And parts of it actually funny.
Well, that is that is part of your style. Yeah, that I should have mentioned that early on.
Larry loves projects, and when he gets a project, he focuses on it from start to finish, and that's the way I feel Donald Trump is. Once Donald Trump is inaugurated as president, he's got this big project now of bringing people together, of doing the money thing with the budget and everything, and I think he will come out like a shining star, because then he'll be able to focus on those important things and not just going across the country hoping to be elected, to be nominated.
Well, that's certainly the optimal. The thing that you wonder about, though, is this is a guy, like all of us, who likes adulation, but more, I would say, than most of us.
Way more.
And the question is, how does that change? You're quite right that he could focus on a few big issues and do better than anyone expects in getting stuff done. But, day to day, watching him, you just have to wonder. It's absolutely unpredictable. And that was sort of the drama of the book. Day to day, you never knew what he was going to do or say. Go after an Hispanic judge. What presidential candidate does that? what Trump did.
Right.
Do you know what was interesting? We had interviews with we have a guy who calls in all the time from Tokyo. He's the U.S. correspondent from Tokyo, and
Yoshi Orikawa.
he was telling us that Japan hopes Trump wins. We have our friends in London who were calling us, and they were hoping Trump lost.
Right.
So it was interesting how Europe wanted him to lose and Asia wanted him to win. At least in our little thing we did. So.
Well, I've got to say that one thing that Trump does not arouse is indifference. And not only Americans but the world are really going to be watching this guy because we have made him now the most powerful person on the planet.
Yeah.
That's pretty big drama.
Richard, it's an honor. Thank you for being on the air with us.
Pleasure talking to you
The
guys.
book is called Fever Swamp. Do you have a website?
My publisher does, absolutely.
Okay, all right. I'm guessing the book is everywhere books are sold. That's the
The
best
book is everywhere books are sold. It's an e-book. It's a hardcover. Fever Swamp. You can find it.
There you go. Fever Swamp is the name you're looking for. Richard North Patterson, thank you for being on the air with us today. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The president-elect expected during today's press conference to continue pushing back against a report he was compromised by Russia.
These allegations are unverified, and the president-elect is tweeting about it on Twitter. Intelligence agencies should never have allowed this fake news to leak into the public. One last shot at me. Are we living in Nazi Germany? A second tweet. I win an election easily. A great movement is verified.
Adam Shapiro with the Fox Business Network. President Obama giving an emotional farewell last night in Chicago, thanking the nation, his vice president, and his wife.
You took on a role you didn't have.